Thank you, Simone. Good morning, everybody. Simone and I were chatting before we started, and I said the worst thing that could happen is if I have to listen to my own voice for the next hour. So please be sure and ask questions. Let Simone be your voice during this presentation, and let us have this be as interactive as possible, because that's the way we're really all going to learn, is by solving some real world questions that you might have. So to that point, please feel free to ask questions at any time. Bring up your own examples. We can try solving some of the issues that you might be seeing. And then always, you're free to challenge what you're hearing. If something I'm suggesting has not worked for you in the past, please go ahead and bring that up, and maybe we can figure out a way to make some tweaks and hopefully see that work again in the future. So before we start, I would love to know if you all could get ready to start typing what you hope to learn today. I just want to make sure that we're on the same track, that I hit on some of the key items that you all are hoping to learn about today. And I will open up the chat. Okay, not everybody answer at once. All the things. All right, Veronica, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, well, we'll get started. Again, how much info is too much info right up front? Very good question. Very good question. And building a supportive board that engages and helps. Excellent, Emily. Thank you for that comment. Okay, so we will hit all of those things that you're bringing up. Best practices for a strong board. Okay, great. Creating a culture of philanthropy. Good, Cameron, thank you. And communicating effectively to make sure they have enough information and understanding of our mission. And the number one best practice to make a board member feel welcome. Okay, hopefully we will hit on all of those. Thank you all for responding to the chat. I appreciate that. So today we will cover why orientation matters, where it fits in the board building cycle. For those of you who have seen a presentation that I've made before, you are familiar with the board building cycle. For some of you, it might be new, but everything we talk about has to fit somewhere within that board building cycle. What should be included in orientation, and that how to make it stick. So the goal is to help you all design an orientation that not only informs your new board members, but helps them feel connected, confident, and inspired to start serving from day one. So why orientation matters? Orientation is the bridge between recruiting your board members and then getting them involved in the organization. It sets the tone for engagement and culture, reinforces the mission, which they should already be connected to, and their accountability, helps them be confident board members and connected board members, and probably most importantly, prevent some misunderstandings and potential early disengagement, which could impact their ability to be long-term connected board members. So in the end, it's about connection to the mission, to one another, and to work. And I'm a big fan of the space program, so love using having opportunities to use the space shuttle in some of these slides, but it's really the launch pad for board effectiveness and culture. It's not a checklist. It's the foundation of a board's long-term success. So question to all of you, and if you could be ready again to start typing in the chat, how many of you have an intentional, documented orientation plan? If you could just type yes, kind of, or no to that question in the chat. That'll be helpful so that we all have an idea of where we are in this system. Okay, so a lot of you do. That's great. Okay, could be stronger. Kind of. Great. Okay, perfect. I'm really happy to see so many yeses. That's awesome. And kind of. So that's great. You all are on a good start with this so far. So where does orientation fit within the board building cycle? So to be clear, orientation is not a one-time event. It is not 2 hours on a Monday afternoon to give people their board handbooks and then forget about orientation the rest of their 3 or 4, or however many years on the board. It's really the rhythm of ongoing board development, and that'll get us into the board building cycle. And if you could just bear with me as we go through the board building cycle, because I feel it's really important to understand where this all fits so that you can see it's really not just about a one-time effort. So when we start at the very top with strategic recruitment and the identify component of the cycle, this is not identifying people to serve on your board. This is actually identifying your organization's needs. You have to understand what's missing from your board or what might soon be missing from your board in order to really understand who you should be cultivating and ultimately recruiting to serve on your board. So it might be particular skills, might be age groups, socioeconomic factors, different things that you might need on your board. If there's potential for significant marketing efforts, you might want to have somebody with marketing expertise on your board. So you really need to look at yourself, create a board a matrix where you can see what skills and abilities your current board members have, and then identify what's missing from that matrix. So once you know what you need, you can start the cultivation process. And that is where you assemble a list of names of people that you're going to cultivate as potential board members. You're not inviting them to serve on the board, but you're involving them to build deeper relationships with the organization. You want to make sure that once you get to the recruiting phase, that you have cultivated a really good group of people who align with the mission and feel a strong connection with your organization. So once you have that group that you've been cultivating, you move on to the recruitment phase of the board building cycle. And this is where you narrow down to maybe 2 or 3 individuals that you're looking to recruit in any given year that align really well with the needs that you identified in phase 1. You have cultivated them, you know they have a strong connection to the organization. So really asking them to serve potentially as board members is a natural movement in that process. It should come as no surprise to anybody who has been effectively cultivated that they are then moving to the recruitment phase. So as I said at the beginning, orientation is that gap between recruitment and involvement. So this is where you start engaging your new board members and you prepare them for success. So you want to deliver a formal onboarding session with the materials that they're going to need to be strong board members from the beginning. And once you make it through that orientation process, you involve them and engage them early. If you have a mentor program, which I strongly recommend, where you pair up seasoned board members with your new board members, that they get engaged with the new board members, take them out to lunch, talk to them before each board meeting, go over the agenda and materials so that they are ready to participate fully from their first meeting on. So that is how you seek that involvement with those new board members. Also by putting them on committees, having them serve on committees and task forces. Education is also part of this. There should be ongoing learning opportunities about board governance or the system in which you operate as an organization at each board meeting. So board education should be a topic that is on the agenda for each board meeting. And then you move into the intentional revitalization piece of the board building cycle. And this is where you evaluate your board members. You assess their engagement, get feedback from your new board members, maybe 6 months after orientation, find out how it's going, but make sure you're evaluating your board and how things are going as much as you are evaluating your programs, because you want to be able to tweak things that are not working well or double down on things that are. So this will only strengthen your board orientation effectiveness when you focus on evaluating the outcomes of that orientation. And then you get into rotate. This is really the last part of the intentional revitalization. You look at board members as their terms are coming up and evaluate them as if they were new to the board. You want to make sure that people aren't being renewed as board members just because their terms are up and it's time to renew them. Make sure that they want to continue serving and are willing to follow the expectations of the board, and that the board wants them to continue serving. So it should not be just a matter of process that they go through and are able to serve on multiple terms. It really should be an intentional discussion at the governance committee. And then finally, celebrate. I don't think this should be part of intentional revitalization. If I could redo this board building cycle, I would. I think you should celebrate at every process. So when you know what you need in that identify point, that's a great place to be. Not every board knows what they need. So celebration should be pervasive throughout this process. If you have a governance committee in place, and I strongly recommend that every board have a governance committee, this board building cycle should define the committee's work plan throughout the year. So the identification takes place every year. Cultivating takes place all year long. You're constantly bringing new people into the organization. So when you're looking to build your governance committee's work plan for the year, it really should be based on this board building cycle. So with that, get ready to start typing. How well is your organization implementing the board building cycle right now? Are you using it? Does your governance committee use it? Are there pieces of that cycle where maybe you think you could use a little bit more work? Is it intentional within your organization? And if anybody wants to talk about a particular piece of that cycle that works well for them, go ahead and type it in. Needs to improve. It's a cycle with a flat tire. I love that, Katie. Yeah, so you want to make sure that each segment is working well. Piece is missing. Okay, well, now you have that board building cycle, and you'll have this later on. You can also do searches for the board building cycle and maybe talk about it at your next governance committee and talk about areas where you can strengthen it. So I highly recommend coming back to that from time to time. All right, now to them. Sorry, go ahead, Simone.
Are you going to be talking about how to have those difficult conversations as far as when you were talking about evaluating instead of just re-signing a new board member? How do you broach that topic of, thank you for your service, we do not want to renew?
Yes, and that is a very difficult conversation to have. And the most important thing to remember is that should be a conversation that happens among board members. A governance committee should never, ever put their chief executive in the place where they have to have that conversation with a board member. So when you think about the structure of a board and staff, the board leads the organization, hires and evaluates the chief executive. So the board members are each other's peers, and the chief executive reports to the board. So always, whenever there is an issue with the performance of a board member, that should be dealt with at the board level. That is issue number one. A lot of boards decide that they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, so they hand it over to the chief executive to take care of, and that is really an abdication of their duties as board members. So when you have somebody who is maybe not fulfilling their expectations, not as aligned with the mission of the organization, it should be something that's discussed at the governance committee level well before their term is up. Much like an employee evaluation, if you have formal evaluations of your employees every year, you don't choose the day that you sit down for that formal evaluation to tell them that they've been late for work every day the past 365 days. You talk to them as the issues come up, contemporaneously with those issues. You have somebody from the governance committee who's addressing those. So if it's a board member who doesn't show up prepared for meetings, it's a conversation that the governance committee chair or the chair of the board might have with that board member. What can we do to provide you with more information? Are there things that you're not understanding? Would it be helpful for us to go over the materials with you ahead of time? So you find out what struggles that person is having and why they're not achieving the expectations of the board. Now, if it gets to where you've had those conversations and it is come up to the end of their first term, let's say, and they're up for renewal for a second term, and the governance committee is not recommending them to move forward to a second term, then it's up to the chair of the governance committee to say, we are so grateful for the time that you have served. We thank you. Here is a plaque to thank you for your service on this board, and we look forward to staying connected with you. It needs to be part of the culture that second, third, however many terms are not a given. And once you start making that part of the culture, then it will not be a surprise to somebody if they don't get nominated. So if you have somebody who's not meeting expectations, who never hears about any concerns from any of the board members, whether it's the governance committee or the board chair, they will be surprised if they're not up for if they don't get recommended for renewal. But somebody who's not meeting all their expectations, who has been talked to about it, won't be surprised. So it's a challenging conversation. One of my takeaways this past year, as I've been talking about this with organizations, is that when you're at that identify phase of your board building cycle, one of the things that you want to look for in prospective board members is somebody who has experience terminating employees in their career and who has done it multiple times, because those are very difficult conversations to have. And somebody who has done it in their career hopefully can do it with kindness and compassion and explanation, and is a great resource for you to have on your governance committee. But if you have a slew of board members who have never had to terminate somebody or terminate multiple people in their career, it can be a very intimidating and difficult conversation to have. So I think it's a unique skill that is missing from a lot of boards. And the question is, are you saying governance committee handle it? Yes, absolutely. This is the governance committee's responsibility. They make that's part of the evaluation process in the board building cycle, is they evaluate their board members. So I know we're getting kind of off topic from orientation, but every year the board members, in addition to signing their conflict of interest statements, they should sign a board expectation statement. So whatever your governance committee and board have agreed to that are the expectations of each board member on that's serving, they agree, yes, I will make an annual contribution. Yes, I will attend all my meetings. Yes, I will advocate for the organization. So that list of expectations you can then turn into your evaluation and ask each board member to evaluate their performance against those expectations. So it becomes part of that cycle. And we can get in this to more deeply in another session if you would like to talk about that. Just ask Simone and she can get it on the calendar. All right. So any other questions or chats, Simone, that I'm missing?
Just quickly, recommendations for number of people on the governance committee.
Well, I guess it depends on the size of your board, but if you have, somewhere between 12 and 17 board members, which is about typical for most community organizations, 3 to 4 members of your governance committee. I think it's a great place for if you have an outgoing chair or president who is still serving on the board, that's a great committee for them to lead or to serve on, because nobody knows more about the workings of the board than somebody who used to run it. Okay. All right. So now we can get to the meat of the matter, what to include with orientation and your onboarding. So first you want to start with the mission and the context. So go back to the beginning. Talk about how your organization was founded. It should tell the story of who you are as an organization, how you work, and how you lead. And please, 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 if I can make one point in this entire presentation, do not come in with a 4-inch 3-ring binder and plop it down in front of everybody. This is not the time to overwhelm people with paperwork and binders. It's an opportunity for storytelling of your mission, your history, your values, stories that bring your mission to life. So this is an opportunity to really engage your new board members. These are your leaders for the next 3, 6, 9 years. These are the people who might be chair someday. So the more you can connect them deeply with your organization from the start, the more likely they are to be really high level leaders in the future. So you want to talk about your current strategic priorities. This is not an opportunity to go through every single tactic on your strategic plan, but talk about the 3 high level priorities or 4, however many you have, and some of the challenges that you're facing as an organization. Have your program staff come in and talk about your programs that you have in place with the organization, the results of those programs, and some mission moments, some impact that your programs have had on the people that you are trying to serve. You also want to help your board members because they come from the community. Give them the landscape of the community. Who are your key partners? Who do you work with? Other nonprofits, maybe some corporate partners that you have, some of your key funders. You never know what other boards some of your new board members might serve on, and they could be great connectors to those. So please make sure that you are spending the time to talk about that community landscape as well. And this is a great time to get them started in the public policy arena. So if you know that you work with certain state legislators or county commissioners that you're working on with public policy component on it, you should mention that as well. So then once you set that mission and context, you can start diving a little bit more deeply into what their roles are as new board members. And the first piece of that is always going over the legal duties of a board member. And keep in mind that this is bare minimum. This is what the law requires each board member to do. It's the duty of care, loyalty, and obedience. And I'm going to go into this a little bit more in the webinar that's we're doing tomorrow on for prospective board members on what to look for when they are seeking to become part of a board of an organization. So if you are interested in learning more, you can join that webinar. You also want to talk about the difference between governance versus management. And this is key because especially if you have board members that have never served on a board before, they might need extra training on how to make sure that they as board members are staying at a governance level and not at the management level. For a lot of new board members, it's easy to get into the weeds and start helping decide what color napkins to have at the next gala or what column should be in your financial reports or things like that. But that's not really where you want your board members to be. You want them to be at the governing level, at the strategic level, the visionary level. Let your staff do the management and let your board govern. So this is a great time to make it that very clear to your new board members. It also doesn't hurt to reinforce that message with your existing board members who are part of orientation. You want to go over the board structure. Be sure and mention the committees that you have in place, how often they meet. See if they have any interest in serving on some of those committees. It would be great to include at some point committee job descriptions, their work plans for the year, so that they get an idea of the kind of work that they would be doing on those committees. Introduce them to your board officers, your president or chair, your vice chair, secretary, treasurer. Make sure they know who the leadership of the board are, and their terms, what they can expect. Hopefully this was already discussed when you were recruiting them. It's one of the questions that they should be asking, but it never hurts to reinforce what those terms are. And getting back to our previous discussion, it would be a great time for you to remind them that term renewals are not automatic, that the governance committee has a process in place, and that their first term is for 3 years, and then they will be reevaluated as if they were a new board member all over again for their second term. And then, of course, any board-related policies that you might have. And again, this does not need to be all of the policies handed to them in 200 pages, but maybe it's a list of policies or some of the key policies, or the fact that you even have policies and how they're reviewed on a regular basis. Make sure that the bylaws are part of this discussion as well. And you can go over some of the key tenets of the bylaws and make sure that they understand that your board is committed to reviewing bylaws on a regular basis, that this is part of the governance committee's work plan, should be looked at least every other year by the governance committee, and make sure that they align with the operations of the board. You do not ever want to be out of compliance with your bylaws. So as your organization changes over time, you want to make sure that your bylaws are amended to update or to reflect those changes in your operations. Provide them with an annual board calendar. Let them know that they're going to be getting appointments from whoever sends out those board appointments, that they should accept. I think it is generous and should be expected for all of the board meetings to be laid out a year ahead of time. You have very busy people on your board. You want to be respectful of their time. So if you have your board meeting set, your committee meeting set in advance, that really helps ensure that they are able to attend those meetings because they get them on their calendar well ahead of time. Please do not send out an email saying, hey, we're looking to have a board meeting in the next week. Who's available? Because you're surely not going to get 100% participation that way. So it reflects on you and your organization as being professional and respectful of their time when you give them that information ahead of time. This is also where you can go over then your board expectation form that you have created, hopefully, with your governance committee. So they are expected to attend all the meetings. They are expected to give a personally meaningful gift on an annual basis, and how they serve as ambassadors in the community for your organization. And then finally, the third part of orientation gets really into the weeds with operations and culture. So let them know what your financial statements look like, what they're going to see on a regular basis. Many of you use dashboards to help your boards understand financial information, knowing that not everybody has a degree in finance or accounting and can read financial statements. Dashboards are a great way to communicate the overall health of an organization in a one-sheet page or one-page sheet. So strongly recommend those. Let them know who the key staff members are, what they do, and who to contact. And when I say who to contact, that should always be the chief executive, the CEO or the executive director. You want to make sure from the very start that board members know that their door into staff is always through the chief executive. They should not be contacting staff members directly, that it should always go through the chief executive, because I can guarantee you that if you have a board member contact one of your staff members, they are going to drop whatever they are doing and start working on whatever the board member asked them to do, instead of focusing on the job that you need them to do as the chief executive. So establish that from the start. I use an hourglass to help visualize this concept, and you have the sand at the top of the hourglass, which is the board, and the sand at the bottom of the hourglass, which is the staff. And that tiny little space in between is where the board chair and the chief executive live. So that anything that comes from the board has to go through the chief executive to get through staff, and anything that comes from the staff has to go through the chief executive to get to the board. You certainly don't want your staff members sending things directly to the board that you as a chief executive have not reviewed from before it goes to the board. Talk about board culture, your norms, your communication and decision-making style. This is something that should be a lot of fun for your board to try and figure out. So if you're not communicating this during orientation, it's usually a fun project for the board to do together, to agree on what the norms and the communication styles are among the board. It's great for mentors also to help new board members understand the culture, because they might wonder why, Ed and Shirley are always bickering with one another, until the mentor tells them, oh, that's all right, they go way back, they always do this. So instead of a new board member potentially feeling a little concerned about, oh my gosh, are they okay, do they get along, the mentor can kind of assuage any of those concerns. So some of those unwritten, unknown rules come to light in orientation. If you have a board portal that you're using, you want to make sure and let your new board members know how they will get an account on that portal and how that's used. If you have a lot of virtual meetings, make sure that they're up to speed on how to use Zoom and chat features. And nothing is worse than having somebody attend a meeting via Zoom who obviously doesn't use Zoom very much. Make sure they sign the confidentiality and conflict of interest while they are sitting there with you. This should be done again every year by your board members. So it's a great time to start at orientation. And then make sure that they get introduced, that you have opportunities to introduce your new board members to the entire board. So maybe at their first board meeting, instead of starting the meeting right at 4:30 like you always do, you start at 4 o'clock with a little wine and cheese to introduce the board members before you dive into that meeting. And I always think that breaking bread together is one of the best ways to build a team. So if you can incorporate that into every board meeting with a social time, I think you'll see that pay off really well. So bottom line, if you do orientation right, you build trust, understanding, and commitment before the first tough decision ever hits the agenda. So you can make people feel comfortable and ready to go. They know the culture, they know the context in which you're operating. So at that very first meeting, they are ready to go from the start. They have all of that information they need to be really highly effective board members. So making it stick. How do you make sure that this orientation that you have put so much time and effort into isn't a one-off, and that it really helps your new board members become highly effective? So make sure that you, as the governance committee chair or as a mentor, are following up in 3 to 6 months for feedback. This is part of that board building cycle evaluation phase. Ask them, what's been most helpful? What did you learn in orientation that you absolutely cannot live without, that was super helpful for your first meeting? And what did we not cover well enough that we should have? So this feedback would be really helpful, so that the next group coming in, you can focus on those pieces that were helpful to this group, and that maybe you can add some new things that would have been helpful that you're finding out. So it's great also to have people who just went through orientation, who were finishing their first year on the board, serve as mentors for incoming board members, because it's fresh on their mind and they knew what they needed as new board members, and often make the best mentors. Reinforce what they learned through ongoing education. So when you talk about your community context and your key funders, that's not just done at orientation. That might be an in-depth conversation that you have at a retreat. How do we expand our community partners? Where are we What are we missing? Where could our board members help make connections for us? And that's also something that they will experience as they dive deeper into committee work. So if they serve on the finance committee, they're going to learn a lot more about the financial statements and budgeting and areas of concern for the organization than they ever did during the orientation.
And
Making
Wendy,
sure, yeah.
we had a question come in as far as who should lead or participate in orientation. Does that include the executive director?
Great question. And I will improve this presentation next time because I got your feedback. So thank you. Yes, it should be the board chair, the chair of the governance committee, the executive director, any key financial or program lead staff members that not your entire program team, but somebody who can speak to the programs of the organization, who's in a supervisory role. And then you also have your new board members and their mentors. Yes, great question. Thank you. Any other, Simone, or was that it?
That was it for now.
Okay, super. So when you see that your new board members are using what they learned in orientation and are really actively engaged in their first couple of meetings, recognize that. And as a mentor, you could say, hey, that was really good. You put those pieces together so quickly. Nice job. Or the chair might say that, or the governance committee chair might say that. And then again, like I said, on the first topic, update your materials annually. Make sure that your board orientation is a living document. Your programs change, your financials change. You might decide to highlight more or less information here or there. So make sure that that's something that's on the governance committee's agenda every year to update those materials on an annual basis. So the bottom line of all of this is that orientation should lead to action by your new board members. Awareness is great, but it's not enough. You want them to come into the first meeting ready to participate, ready to add value. That's the whole reason why they were selected to be part of your organization, is because they filled a gap that you identified at the very beginning of that board building cycle. Their voices are needed on your board. So make sure that they have all the information that they need to begin adding value from the start. So a few common pitfalls that I have seen with orientation, and this gets back to my comment about your 4-inch 3-ring binder. Overloading new members with information. This is really a time to get them excited about being a part of your organization. They already deeply care for the mission. They already want to be connected to the organization. And if you decide to go through your articles of incorporation and every single policy and every bylaw line by line, they are not going to feel the love from you, and they're going to start questioning whether or not this is the right board for them. So make sure that you are covering key topics and that you tell them that this orientation session is designed to help them come into the organization, that you couldn't possibly cover everything they need to know to be an effective board member at the orientation, but you're going to give them what they need to get a running start. Make sure that you focus on culture and relationships. It is crucial because culture is key for organizations, employees, as well as board members. And you want to make sure that you are focusing on culture through every part of the board building cycle. One person who has a completely different idea of the organization's culture can really impact a board negatively. So culture fit is key, and developing those relationships from the get-go is key. Skipping follow-up. As I have said probably too many times, you need to evaluate the effectiveness of your orientation. And if you consider it, a one and done and don't follow up with that board member, you're not going to have the opportunity to improve and to fill in some gaps that might have been missing from that orientation. And finally, assuming that everyone already knows the basics. We oftentimes, as staff members, because we wake up every morning thinking about our jobs and our organizations, board members don't. And we do them a disservice by forgetting that. So always make sure that you are covering those basics especially with your new board members during orientation. Don't assume that they already know everything and that they're going to be bored by what they hear. Just start at the beginning, because in my opinion, over communication at best can be slightly annoying, but under communication can cause real damage. So best to be slightly annoying if you're repeating yourself than to not give a new board member what they need to be really successful when they come onto your board. So with that, I'd like to know, thinking about all of those keys to board orientation, what is one improvement that you'll make to your board's orientation this year? And I'd also, following up, yay, Katie, that's awesome. Clear expectations, great. Working on streamlining the information and more storytelling. Super, and following up with new board members, great. What are your thoughts on Zoom orientations? So Simone, do you mind keeping track of the comments so I'll answer that question on Zoom orientation, and then if there are any more that come through. And please go ahead and submit your questions. Now, that was the end of my presentation. I was hoping that we would have about 15 minutes for some questions at the end. So I will stop sharing at this point. And okay, Zoom orientations, not my favorite. If it is at all possible to have people be able to see the whites of their eyes, each other's eyes, to have cookies and tea or something like that. Like I said, breaking bread together does amazing things for a board. It would always be ideal to have people there in person. That said, I find some of the most difficult meetings are hybrid meetings, when you have some on Zoom and some in person. So if you can't have everybody in person, I would rather have everybody via Zoom than have a hybrid orientation. Because typically when you have a hybrid, you have people who are remote, like in pictures like Simone and me right now. But when you have the rest of the group, it's all like tiny little heads around a table, and you really can't see everybody and facial expressions and all of that, especially if you're sharing your screen and going over some information, then those little heads around the table are even smaller. So I think it would be my first choice always in person, because that will help set the relationships. And somehow we managed to do that before 2020. And I would love to go back to that and have Zoom be used when it is most appropriate, but not as a first choice.
There's no other questions coming in, just more follow-up or feedback to your question.
Okay.
Any other questions? We have 15 more minutes, so feel free. This is a great time. If there's any burning questions you have regarding orientation, this is the time. You have the expert on the line.
Stump the panel, please. Oh, expectations of fundraising. You're right, Cameron. I did not answer your question. So I did a little bit in that we talked about every board member having a having to make a personally meaningful gift to the organization. And that personally meaningful gift, in my definition, is typically one that you have to talk with your spouse or significant other about before you make it, or one that requires you to sleep on it. So for some board members, a personally meaningful gift might be $500,000. For others, it might be $50 or $10. So whatever to them is something that they have to think about before making. If you are a human services organization and you have individuals on your board with lived experience, which I hope that many of you do, it might be even smaller than that. But the point is that when funders are looking at your board giving, it's important for them to see 100% giving from all board members. So I encourage that. And in their role as funder or fundraisers on a larger level, board members often hesitate to come on nonprofit boards because they don't want to have to ask people for money. And what I always tell individuals is that you should never ask somebody for money. You have professionals who do that who are on staff of the organizations. What your responsibility as a board member is to connect people to the organization to serve as potential funders, to serve as potential board members. So yes, you do have a responsibility as a board member to make connections for that organization. And that is your key role in fundraising. In addition, if you have the means and your organization has events, you should be buying tables at those events as a board member, if, like I said, if you have the means. And then inviting not maybe not your employees who don't have the means, but individuals that you know in the community who have a connection to the mission, who have the ability to give at those fundraisers. Introduce those individuals to the chief executive while you are at those fundraisers. So make sure that you see it and use it as an opportunity to build the relationships for the organization and not just there to have a good time at a fun party. Does that answer your question or okay, good, Cameron, thank you. How long should
Got it.
How long should orientation be? I would say 2 hours. If you have a morning orientation, invite everybody for breakfast, give a half an hour for everybody to eat, to chat, and then to have the orientation that takes place 1.5 to 2 hours. After that, people will start getting itchy and their ability to retain the information won't be as good. But if you can cover everything in that time frame and then connect them with their mentor or with the governance committee chair, and then make sure that when they leave that orientation that they put that follow-up on their calendar, for 30 or 60 days later.
Now, we do have a question as far as if the board is in growth mode, how many new board members or new members should you be adding annually?
And that's a great question. So I'm going to give a general answer because it depends. I'm going to give the attorney answer. It depends. But if you are adding on, let's say you're a board of 12 and you are embarking on a capital campaign and you don't really have a whole lot of people who are connected to significant wealth, and you want to add, and you have identified what you need, you've cultivated a group of people, and you have 6 amazing people who have the means to give and have the connections, please do not bring 6 people on your board at one time. And here's why. Because that is 1/3 of your board now. You've gone from 12 to 18. And in 3 years, you're going to have, or let's say your term limits are 3 years, which is typical for most nonprofit organizations. In 3 years, you're going to have 6 people, plus however many would have been up for renewal from that original 12, up for renewal. And they could choose to leave your organization. And when you have that many individuals that could exit your board, whether it's their first term or they are terming off because they've completed their final term, that is a significant loss to your organization. So what I would recommend is that you look, 5 or 6 or even 10 years out, map out your current board members' terms, when they're up for renewal, when they're going to rotate off, and then smooth out as much as you can that potential for board rotation in any given year. You do not want to have anywhere near a third of your board members eligible to leave in any given year, because that will leave you in a lurch for board leadership, for committee membership, and then you're likely to make the same mistake all over again and be in that same situation in the future. So board smoothing is a critical piece of what the governance committee should be doing. So if you have a board of 12, maybe you have 2 that are rotating off every year. Or if you have 15 or 17, maybe you have 2 or 3 that rotate off in any given year. So just make sure that you're not losing a whole bunch of really critical people at any given year. I hope that makes sense. Yes, you'll get a copy of the presentation. I will send that to Simone and she'll send it out after. And then how many board members need to be at the orientation? So you want to have the chair of your governance committee there, the board chair, your new board members, and then mentors if you have them for each board member. And that's pretty much it. You don't want it to be too overwhelming. You want it to be conversational. And if you end up with 20 people at orientation, there might be an intimidation factor that those new board members have where they don't speak up as much as they would just because they're in a room with a whole bunch of strangers. So keep that in mind that, just because everybody else on the board knows each other, these new people are coming in without knowing each other.
And then we had a question coming in through the Q&A. We are small but growing and learning. How appropriate would it be to share your presentation to our existing board for development?
Go for it. Yeah, I think that you can use it in any capacity. Please. Yes, the CEO should be at the orientation. And any key staff, like if you have a CFO and you want just the board to have FaceTime with the CFO, this is a great time to do it. And your head of programs, if you want to dive deep into your programs, have your head of programs there as well, so that your board members can get to know staff and develop those relationships as well. Yeah, the CEO needs absolutely 100% without a doubt part of the orientation.